Every evening, a dog waited at the station for his owner. One morning, the man left for work and did not come home. But the dog did not know that, so he came back, and he waited. Tonight, I'll tell you a story from Japan. He came to the house as a small puppy, a round, soft thing with ears that did not yet stand up. The professor lifted him with both hands. He was warm. He smelled of straw and milk and cold morning air. The professor turned him gently, looked at him for a long moment, and gave him a name. Hachi. He was an Akita, a large Japanese dog, though that first winter he was small enough to fall asleep in the crook of an arm, and often did. In the evenings, the professor read by the lamp, and Hachi lay against his feet, rising and falling with the man's slow breathing. The house was quiet. Outside, the wind moved through the bare trees. Inside, it was warm, and the lamp threw a soft circle of gold across the floor where the dog had fallen asleep. It was the kind of quiet that two creatures make when they are simply glad to be near each other. Hachi grew quickly. By the next year, his ears stood tall, and his tail curled like a question over his back. He was pale gold, with a broad, gentle face and dark, patient eyes. Every morning the two of them walked the same path. Through the gate, down the narrow street, past the shop just opening its shutters, toward the station at Shibuya. The professor walked without hurry, and Hachi stayed close, his shoulder almost brushing the man's leg, matching his pace without being told. The morning light came sideways through the houses. The air smelled of wood smoke and rain on stone, and breakfast through open windows. It was an ordinary walk, the kind you take so many times you stop noticing it, the kind you would give anything later to take just once more. At the station, the professor always stopped at the gate. He would crouch down to the dog's level. He would rest his hand on the top of Hachi's head just for a moment and say something soft that no one else could hear. Then he would stand and walk through and step onto the train. Hachi watched him go. He did not whine. He did not follow. He only stood and watched the place where the man had disappeared into the crowd until there was nothing left to watch. Then he turned and walked home alone. He knew the way by heart, and he knew that the day was only half over. The first half was the leaving. The second half, the better half, was the part worth waiting for. Every evening near the same hour, Hachi came back to the station. He would sit by the gate and watch the people pour out from the trains. Strangers by the hundreds, faces he did not know, hurrying home in the failing light. He let them all pass. He was waiting for one face. And then, at last, it would come. The professor, tired from his day, his eyes already searching the crowd for the dog he knew would be there. And Hachi would rise, his whole body moving with his tail, every part of him saying the same thing. "You are home! You are home! You are home!" They walked home together in the evening light. This was the shape of their days, morning and evening, leaving and returning. For Hachi, the world was very simple. The man went away. The man came back. He always came back. One morning in late spring, they walked to the station as always. The air was warm and still. The new leaves were a soft, bright green, and the light fell gently on the path, on the man's shoulders, on the dog's pale fur. At the gate, the professor crouched down, the way he always did. He rested his hand on Hachi's head. Maybe he said something. Maybe he only looked at him a moment longer than usual. We cannot know. Then he stood and walked through and stepped onto the train. It was the same as every other morning. Exactly the same. Hachi turned and walked home and waited for the evening to come. He had no way of knowing that this morning was not like the others, that this was the last time. That evening, Hachi was at the station, in his place by the gate. The trains came and went. The crowds poured out and thinned to nothing. The lamps came on one by one against the deepening blue. He watched every face, the way he always did, waiting for the one that was his. But it did not come. Far away at his work, the man had fallen ill that day, very suddenly and very quietly. He had not been able to come home. He would never come home again. But Hachi did not know any of this, so he waited. He waited until the last train had come and gone. He waited until the platform was empty and the night had turned cold around him. And then, slowly, not understanding, he walked home alone in the dark. The next evening, Hachi came back to the station. He sat by the gate, in the same spot, and watched the trains. The professor did not come. So the next evening he came again, and the evening after that, and the one after that. He returned always to the place where he had last seen the man, and he waited there, exactly as he had always waited, for as long as it took. He did not understand that the waiting had changed. To him, nothing had changed at all. The man would step down from a train, tired, and look out for him through the crowd. Hachi only had to be there when he did. So he was there, every single day, without fail. After a while, a kind man took Hachi into his home. He gave him food and a warm place to sleep, and gentle hands at the end of the day. It was a good home, with everything a dog could want. Hachi could have stayed. He could have let the waiting go and lived out his quiet years beside a warm fire, and no one in the world would have thought less of him for it. But every evening, near the same hour, something in him would stir. He would rise and go to the door and wait for it to open. And the man would open it and watch him go and understand. And Hachi would walk back through the streets to the station, to the gate, to wait. Through cold and rain and the early winter dark, He made that journey every single night. He had a home now. It simply was not the one he was looking for. And so the seasons turned, and Hachi kept his place. Summer came, and the heat lay heavy on the streets, and the cicadas cried in the trees, and still he came. Autumn came, and the dry leaves gathered around him where he sat, and the evenings grew shorter, and still he came. Winter came, and the snow settled softly on his fur as he watched the gate, until he was almost lost in the white, and still he did not move. 1 year passed, then another after that. The trains grew older. The faces in the crowd slowly changed. The city went on around him, and the dog kept waiting, as though no time had passed at all. In time, the people of the station came to know him. They saw that he came every day, in every weather, and sat in the same place. And little by little, they came to understand why. The man who grilled food on skewers began to save him the best scraps. The station workers let him rest in the warm corners, out of the wind and the rain. Children stopped on their way past to sit beside him for a while. They began to call him Hachiko, adding a small, fond ending to his name, the way you do for someone you have taken into your heart. He let them feed him. He let them sit close. He was gentle with all of them. But his eyes never rested on any of them for long. They always drifted back to the gate, to the trains, to the one place where a familiar face might still, one day, appear. The years pressed down on him, the way years do. His muzzle turned gray. His steps grew slow and careful. One of his ears no longer stood quite as proud as it once had. There were cold mornings when his old body did not want to rise at all, when it would have been so easy to stay where it was warm. But he rose. Every time he rose. And he made his way to the station, a little stiffer with each passing season, and he took his place by the gate. He had waited far longer than anyone believed a dog could wait. And still, when the trains came in and the doors slid open, he would lift his old head and he would look. Just in case. Just this once. It was a cold morning in March when they found him. He was near the station, in the place he always went, lying on his side as though he had only laid down to rest for a moment. His long waiting was over at last. Almost 10 years had passed since the professor walked through that gate one warm spring morning and did not return. Almost 10 years, and in all that time, Hachiko had kept every single evening. He had never once stopped believing. And if, somewhere far beyond all of this, a tired man finally stepped down from a train and looked out over the crowd, then at last, after all those years, the face he had been searching for was there, looking back at him. There is a statue of Hachiko at Shibuya Station now. It stands on the very spot where he used to wait, cast in bronze, his ears up, his face turned patiently toward the crowd, as though, even now, after everything, he has not quite given up the watch. Thousands of people pass it every day, hurrying to their trains, just as they once hurried past the living dog. And still, every single day, someone stops there. Someone says, "Here, let's meet here, by the dog." Of all the places in this enormous, restless city, it has somehow become the one where people come to find one another. The dog who waited so long for a single person has become the place where no one anymore has to wait alone. I keep thinking about those evenings. The way he sat there, watching the same gate long after the trains had gone quiet. I'm not sure he was hoping exactly. Maybe he was just remembering. Maybe for him there was no difference between the two. I wonder what you saw when you watched him wait. What about you? Good night.